Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast, episode number 29. This is the second time we've done a false start, so I'm just going to be open because these boys are going to shred me for it in a minute. So I'm getting in before they even can. But episode number 29, we've been hyping this one for a bit. We have a very special guest with us here, JT, not Adam. The special guest is not Adam.
I wasn't going to make the same joke. You guys missed the joke on the first. I'm just going
to shred myself in this one. Okay, so James Tenacity Tomlinson, otherwise known as JT. So I'm going to go through his many accolades and contributions, I would say, to the jiu-jitsu world. He's a BJJ black belt under Lachlan Giles out of Absolute MMA St. Kilda. He's a strength and conditioning coach, jiu-jitsu instructor, co-creator of Bulletproof for BJJ, a strength, mobility, and conditioning program specifically for jiu-jitsu, which we've spoken about before in the past. He's an author of the world's first BJJ Super Hero book, Jugo. He's the creator of, in my opinion, the world's greatest jiu-jitsu card game called Jugo, otherwise known as Jugo Play on Instagram. And he is also a jiu-jitsu rapper.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Doing my homework.
Wu-Tang.
Doing my homework, son.
Yeah, there you go.
So, JT, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's quite the introduction. I appreciate it. Yes, I would say all those things are more or less accurate.
That introduction was like if you were looking at people to interview for a job position and you're going through their CVs and you're like, this PDF is 12 pages long.
There was a lot of shit to cover. I wanted to be thorough.
He's done a lot, bro. He's done a lot.
Yeah.
I appreciate the introduction. Thank you for having me on, gentlemen. I feel honored to be the first guest. Obviously, I am more important than Joe Worthington. That
Absolutely.
is why he will be, down the chain
At a later time.
Yeah,
whenever we can fit him
triple
in.
digits. I'm talking episode 100 plus.
Shout out Joe Worthington.
We need to go through
my partner in crime. Shout out.
Once we've gone all through, the good guests in Sydney, then we'll get our way.
Default to him.
Yeah, whatever.
So jumping straight in, bro. For those who don't know, you and I have known each other for years. We've trained together in Brazil, actually, where we first met. And I mean, we spoke a bit about that on when we were both previously on the Jungle Brothers podcast.
Indeed.
A few episodes back. So we don't need to go too much into that because we could spend a 3-hour podcast, you and I just talking shit.
Plenty.
So I want to more start with what's been happening now over the last 3 months in lockdown and since you moved to Sydney, because as Kieren mentioned, you're a black belt under Lachlan Giles out of Melbourne, but you've recently in the last year moved up to Sydney. Then we had the lockdown, but on the flip side, you've had the opportunity to be physically closer to Joey and do much more work with Bulletproof and all those sorts of things. So I just wanted to hear a bit more about Bulletproof, what you guys have been working on, what you have planned for the future.
Definitely.
To get all of us strong and mobile.
Well, look, the move to Sydney was 2 or 3-fold. So last year in Melbourne, shout out Melbourne, thoughts and prayers, Victoria.
Are they actually, do you know, are they still in lockdown?
They are still in lockdown.
Well, I mean, look, we're only 3 days out of
lockdown.
lockdown.
They're still in lockdown.
Yeah. We're just dancing.
Yeah.
Do you know, obviously you've
Kissing in the street.
Obviously you've got lots of, friends and connections down there. I'm a bit removed actually. Do you know, are they going with a similar 70%?
Look, I don't know exact stats around that. I don't pay attention to the news because it's kind of irrelevant.
But the gyms are closed, right?
The gyms are closed, which sucks, and it's just difficult. I don't know what the path is out there. So
yeah.
Look, shout out Melbourne, thoughts and prayers. You're my fam. Love you guys. But the thing is, I think we are so fortunate right now because it's a classic, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? Being in Melbourne in lockdown last year.
Because, you copped the brutal Melbourne lockdown.
It was about 9 months. So we it was like March to June. We got a little break and then the government's like, we stuffed it up.
Yeah.
Hard lockdown. And then it was pretty brutal.
That was savage for you
towards
guys.
the end.
Yeah.
And so my whole life is lifting weights, exerting some kind of physical force onto other people, whatever that looks like, kicks, punches, chokes, and, you know, just trying to be active. And so much of what was going on there conspired against that. And that's fine. Like I stayed productive last year, but for sure there was like some family things going on. A couple of people passed away last year. I couldn't go to their funeral.
Because they were in New South Wales.
And, you know, I'm not going to go super deep on it, but being at someone's funeral via Zoom is rubbish. Like that's not what we do as humans, you know?
Yeah, it'd be a rather awkward experience,
man,
actually.
It's just like, anyway, I don't want to go into that, but I just said to my partner, Ola, shout out Ola, my chef, my companion, my
boss.
my muse, my boss, my chief, salute. Yeah, like I just said, let's move to Sydney because I wanted to be closer to my family. And then also I had a chat to Joey, and Joey's like, man, do you want to be the head jiu-jitsu instructor at Jungle Brothers? I was like, oh, yeah? Yeah, man, that could be cool. And then I was like, oh, but then I'm going to have to see you all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Just for reference, he looked at Kieren when he said that. Not at me. He looked at Kieren.
I was actually like imagining Joey's face on your face. And I was like, the feeling of disappointment is like, oh, this guy again. But no, in truth, like we knew that even though we've worked on Bulletproof remotely, obviously Joey working with people here in Sydney and me working with people in Melbourne, with our powers combined.
Yeah, forces combined with that one.
We are Captain Bulletproof. So we had, it was something, and I had said I wanted to do a few things. I said, look, I think we could do a good podcast. There's a few other things I want to explore. And so the first part of the year where we didn't have lockdown, we got busy, man. And it's been great. And being at Jungle Brothers is great. I've always said it's my favorite gym in all of Australia. So having the opportunity to be there, start doing PT there as well. So awesome. Such a great community. So to connect with that and also just be able to work with Joe, obviously connect with Alliance. You know, you helped me out a lot in giving me a coaching job at Alliance, and connecting with the team was like such a great feel because, you know, we had talked about potentially running a gym together.
Yeah. I mean, back when we trained in Brazil together, like, you know, we've trained so much together. You were my strength. I mean, you were my strength and conditioning coach. And even though now we don't do S&C together, I still think of you as my, you know, perpetual strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah, it's because I berate you.
Yeah. The
Adam, back straight, head up, deep breath. What are you doing? It's like, bro, I'm rolling. Go away.
I remember, because I would always say, for listeners of the Bulletproof podcast, they would be well aware of the history of you and Joey. But, you know, in a nutshell, you and Joey are these like doppelgangers who actually didn't know each other, but were both in the jiu-jitsu scene. And then turns out like you both have, you know, heaps in common and everything, to the extent that a lot of people by default think you're brothers, right?
Yeah.
Like you, not only do you look similar, you have similar mannerisms.
Funny story on that. So Paul, the founding fathers of Jungle Brothers are Joe, Paul, and Tiora. Paul's mother pulls up. So
Is this recently?
In a car. This is like, like start of the year.
Yeah.
Pulls up in a car with laundry for Paul's kids.
Yeah.
I'm just at the front of the gym. Hey, Joe. Just I have a pretty reasonable beard. Joe's beard game, not quite as strong.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe. She hadn't seen Joe since he had a kid. Right. Waves me in. I'm like, oh, do I burst the bubble? Oh, I didn't get a chance.
Did you know it was Paulie's mum at this stage?
No, but I was just like, oh, it's whatever.
Yeah.
Here we are. I walk up and she's like, oh, I got some laundry for Paul. Hey, how's your kid, boy or girl? And I was like, oh, it's a boy. She's like, oh, yeah, cool. And it's like, yeah, take it up to him, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I can't burst this bubble.
Yeah.
So you're telling me,
I was too deep.
JT, you impersonated Joey Worthington.
Well, no, I think I was mistaken for Joey Worthington and just didn't want to destroy the illusion because it would be hard to explain. Because she just thought, this is Joe. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know who she was. I just didn't know what was going on. So I just end up with this tray of freaking fresh laundry like, all right. Have a nice day. She's like, good to see you. Drove off. I was like,
Nice.
Oh,
Nice.
that's
these
so
are common
good.
occurrences.
Yeah.
So we mentioned obviously a few times Bulletproof for BJJ, you being the co-founder with Joey. How did Bulletproof for BJJ start? So my understanding is it began from yourself approaching Joey for a BJJ Fanatics instructional. Something along those lines.
No, not exactly. So, I mean, Joey actually, the absolute origin of it was Joe and Tiora ran a workshop for jiu-jitsu athletes, which was called like, I think, Get Bulletproof for BJJ.
Right.
And that was like the first thing. And then, you know, many grapplers from all around the place came to Jungle Brothers, which is awesome. And so what he was doing was cultivating this brand of training, which was Bulletproof. I had been doing a thing called Grapple Fitness. That was like essentially very similar, not same, but I had done it with all the grapplers I'm exposed to in Melbourne, and I had also done it in Brazil. So I got to do work with Adam. I did work with Michael Lange. I did work with Demetrius Souza. I did a bit of rehab work with Gabby Garcia. Pretty much anyone in the team I was exposed to, they're like, oh, you got something jacked up? Go see JT.
Yeah.
Like Fabinho Colloy, who just got bronze medal at the Worlds, like very narrowly lost to Gianni
He did
Grippo.
in the no-gi, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, Fabinho Colloy is a monster.
Absolute beast.
And he's like a slim, trim superhero of a man. I got to work with everybody in the team, which is really fantastic. And so I saw benefits to world championship level people. Like my training and methodology worked with them. I'm like, this can work for everyday jiu-jitsu people, right? So I was like, oh, cool. So it really was proof of concept. Like I knew that my training methods were effective for general population because I've been a PT a long time, but having had that exposure to super high level people, like even like Alex Monsalve and Serginho Moraes, like I did rehab work with them, which was great. And so when I came back to Australia, I was like, right, I'm going to dial this thing up. Joey and I had known each other for years. I saw what he was doing. I saw what I was doing. And I thought we'd form a rap group. Yeah. Well, no, it's like, you know, classic middle-class white boys thing. It's just like, we would be stronger together. And I thought of it as a collaboration because like the thing we're working on independently could potentially compete, but we're friends. So I just looked at it like, I understand Joey's strengths. I understand my strengths. And even though we weren't like best mates, we were like good friends. I just said to him, hey man, like, why don't we work on this project together? Because we kind of been circling each other in a perennial way. I'd stayed at his place in Bondi, the old school place that had the skate ramp in there. It's like super dope place back in the day. We'd caught up for meals and coffees and we trained. And yeah, man, it was just like, I felt there was a degree of synergy between us and we could work it out. And I looked at it and Bulletproof as a name is just rock solid. And I said to him, man, I'm happy to go with that. If you're happy to like share it as a brand, and we just cultivated it
after
together.
you changed the name, you're kind of like Justin Timberlake in The Social Network. Have you seen that movie where he's
removed the
from the Facebook?
and no, well,
Get Bulletproof for BJJ, rubbish. Just call it Bulletproof.
Well, it's one of those things that for me, I felt I wanted to remove any friction with us working together. So, you know, Joey will always be like, I came up with the idea. It's like, pretty sure I orchestrated this whole fucking thing, bro. So, I mean, you can say what you like, backup dancer. But that's the thing, right? Like, I had made a decision many years ago that creativity comes from collaboration. And the thing about jiu-jitsu, which is holding jiu-jitsu back, is at its core, jiu-jitsu is exceptionally competitive. The thing that's moved jiu-jitsu forward is creativity. People inventing new guards, people inventing new passes, looking at positions differently. Like that is how it's evolved, and that's how jiu-jitsu stayed cool. Whereas like you look at something like judo's kind of gone backwards. They've removed certain grips. They've made it more restricted, basically so classical Japanese jiu-jitsu can win. Japanese judo can win. And that's fine, but that actually makes it less interesting. Jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is really freaking interesting because it's so different. It's evolving all the time, right? So I made a deal with myself like probably 5-6 years ago. I'm going to be more creative and less competitive. And I just looked at Joe and I'm like, bro, we could be a cool team. And really that's kind of how it started. And we filmed our first bit of proper content at the Christmas of 2018, our website didn't go up till like September of 2019. But I had a connection to Bernardo. I knew Bernardo from training in Brazil, from training with Adam, being at Alliance. And at that time, Fanatics was starting to take off and they didn't really have a lot of fitness products. And I thought we can definitely do something there. And Joey agreed and we went that path.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think, like you guys working together was I see it as a bit of a no-brainer as well, because having trained with both of you, right? Like we trained together in Brazil and everything. And the reason I know Joey is because when I moved back to Australia from Brazil, you were still in Melbourne and you're the one that introduced me to Joey because you were like, man, if you're not training with me, train with Joey. And so having done, strength and conditioning with both of you, not only do you, of course, have your individual styles because you're two different people, but you're specialized in slightly different things. The same way two jiu-jitsu fighters can both be world champions, but one's better at one thing than the other, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Joey's more into sort of all the mobility.
He's a movement guy.
Yeah. He's
You'll just catch him doing some spinal. You're like, are you popping it locking?
Like, I know he does stuff that looks like popping and locking. And I'm like, dude, I can't do that.
It's all good.
You two just dancing together.
Mate, I mean, it's pretty funny. Actually, there's a really great Instagram, it's pretty new. It's called Move Boys.
Move Boys.
Yeah, BOIS. And it's making fun of that whole, like, if a movement person catches you saying the word flexibility.
Oh, no.
What does the research show? It's just one of these things like, Joey's put in a lot of hard work and, apprenticed under Ido Portal, did like an internship, which means he paid a lot of money, worked his ass off and got pimped, but learned a lot of good stuff. But, Joey's a smart guy. He forms his own conclusions. The Jungle Brothers started that gym and Joe, to his own credit, has worked really hard on his knowledge and his coaching ability. And that's the thing I think can be missing. You can have all the qualifications in the world, but if you don't have the ability to relate the information to someone or enable them to take the step to change positively, what are you doing? And yeah, Joe's a great coach. I mean, we coach differently.
I mean, it's unfortunate for him. I mean, once a backup dancer, always a backup dancer.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that, like, one of the first ever coaching quotes I had from Joe is, "You don't got this, bro." Like mid-heavy squat, like front squat. You don't got this, bro. I mean, he knows me pretty well. Like, I don't. I'll show you.
Did you get it though?
Oh, but of course. But I mean, but that's all he ever does is just try and nitpick me. But that's all right. Like, I have enough self-belief for the both of us.
But it's funny, you guys do have very different coaching styles. Like when you were teaching at Alliance, and lots of people thought you guys were brothers, and I would kind of say like, oh well, James is like the less friendly version of Joey,
No, I think it's a reflection of our personality. Joe comes off as like a really nice, friendly, charming, cool guy. He's not. Like, I mean, to engage with Joe, he's not. He's a lovely guy. But I mean, Joe is such and he really knows how to interact with people. He's got great EQ. I mean, I think I have decent EQ, but I don't care. The difference is I'm not trying to be your friend. If you come to me for advice, I'm going to give it to you straight because I don't want to waste your time. Also, don't want to waste my time. The thing is, I've been in the industry twice as long as Joe. I've been doing this thing like coaching PT since 2002. It's 20 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly, right? Like,
I mean, the
thing about that is like, what I've seen is, and what I've done as a mistake is I have been really nice to people thinking this will make them like buy into what I'm saying more. No, it makes them buy into their own bullshit more. So then when I'm like, no, that's completely wrong. You're an idiot. Let's change your frame of reference. I mean, that's not the best way to sell an idea, but if you're not interested in what I have to say, fuck off. I don't care. Don't change. Don't be different. Don't evolve. That's fine. Stay the same. See you in 20 years when you still suck. Like, I'm not that bothered because life's really short. If you don't have enough self-interest to improve yourself, mate, go talk to someone who gives
Yeah.
a fuck. It's not me. I really want to help you, right? Only insofar that you are invested. If I see that you're fully invested in doing everything you can, even if you don't know what you're doing, credit to you. I will help you.
And that's what I've really enjoyed about the time we trained together. Like, all we would do strength and conditioning in the park in Brazil.
Yeah.
In one particular, program that we did or camp we did
Was
was
that Ibirapuera?
Yeah, Ibirapuera.
Is this
Sorry.
the infamous band sessions?
Well, yeah, like we used to do brutal. I mean, maybe JT was like, dude, they were pretty soft. But for me, they were brutal. And it was
they were hard.
preparing, I was like a blue belt preparing to fight these selectives that were going to pay for my trip to the US to compete, which I did win. But yeah, I remember, it was just, there was none of that sort of, oh, come on, bro, like you can do it. It was more what worked for me. It was like, dude, like just stop being such a fucking bitch. Like, fucking do it. There was one bit in particular I remember, and at this stage I had been not held at blue belt, but like I'd been at blue belt for a long time. And I remember it was whatever thing we were doing, and I was doing push-ups or something. And I remember James said to me, he was like, man, if you want your fucking purple belt, you will do 5 more push-ups, something like that. And I was just like, oh, like, I remember, and even just other stuff as well. Like, James helped me with a huge amount of rehab post-surgery on my knees. And one thing that, I don't believe from a qualification point of view, you have like the degree for it. But, I've said this to you off air that James is my go-to person when I'm not like booking a physio. The amount of knowledge that you have with anatomy and everything is crazy. And I remember I was recovering from knee surgery, and as a result, my ITB and my hamstring were just like, they were wrecked. They were out of control. And so James was living with me at this time in our little like 4 square meter apartment.
Sleeping on floor.
Yep. And was giving me like deep tissue massages, right? To the point where like, it was just that approach where he's like, man, I'm just ramming this down your throat because this is what you need and I don't care. And I remember I was almost crying. Like I could not.
Oh, I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor.
Hi,
Take these, and
Hi,
all of
Dr.
these.
Nick. Hi, everybody. Yeah. Like, I couldn't have been closer to crying without crying. But I mean, the result was.
You're a bitch.
Yeah.
No. I would look. It's
but I mean, you saw the results, right? Like I went on to recover really well. And like at this stage, until we did this work together, I was like a year still struggling with this post-surgery rehab. And then you just like rammed it down my throat. And
it's difficult, right? Because there is a gap between physio and 100, like healthy. So like, don't get me wrong. This is I live and breathe via the advice of a good physiotherapist, right? You get that acute injury, you need that help. But after about 12 weeks and you're out of the acute phase, and let's say your ligaments and your meniscus, like if it's your knee, like all your structural things are there. Like you have structural integrity of the joint, but you're really sore and you're really inflamed and you're all these things. The body does all these natural things to just protect you, but that's not going to enable you to bloody win the selectives or do whatever you're going to do. So you've got to go through an absolute world of pain to restore really good function. But you still have to get to healthy before you go to strong, athletic, champion. The problem is, being humans that we are, we want to skip steps. We want to go from kind of semi-fucked up to champion. And you can't. And if you try and take that jump, then the chance of re-injury is like super high because you compensate because of like lack of ability. So look, for me, the thing is like, I knew you didn't have another option. So I was like, what's he going to do? You're kind of hostage to my approach. Like, I have my victims.
you're like, I live here too. You're like, where am I going?
So for someone that's not maybe necessarily recovering from an acute injury, say someone is at the healthy, would you see a program like a strength conditioning and mobility program being that catalyst toward going from good to better, essentially good to great?
Yeah, I think you got to go from good to better, and then better to like very good before you we go to greatness. But it's just your aspirational mindset, Kieren. You're just like,
100%.
how do I go from good to greatness? Champion. Yeah, sure. I think one of the best things I have learned, and this is from a very good strength conditioning coach, I'll misappropriate the quote. It's reasonably famous, which is you need to add range before you add load. So as much as you can load range, right? And there's different research around this. All you move boys out there, don't get upset with me. But essentially, if you don't have full range of motion, like a healthy range of motion, that means you don't have full control of your joint. In jiu-jitsu, the gentle art of bending joints the wrong way, someone's going to force you there. It'll happen. In a roll, rolls are so chaotic. So it's like if you don't have the control, your own control over your body, and someone takes control, chance of injury is super high. So I always say that in that restorative phase, when you're still in the recovery phase, or say you're just coming up on healthy, you need to have a look at your range of motion, because there's heaps of stuff that we do day to day, sitting in these chairs, sitting in the car, being on our phones, all the nonsense we do day to day also has a negative effect on our bodies. Jiu-jitsu itself has its cost and affects our bodies in certain ways. What's really important for people to know is how to get right. Like, what are the 2 or 3 key things I can do every day to help counteract all this stuff I'm doing to my body? And you may not even be aware of it, and that's where it's good to seek help. And, a physio is not necessarily the person to see about that. Some physios are strength conditioning coaches as well. Man, they can give you that advice, but then for the best part, they're not. That's when you do need to go seek out a coach who can give you feedback about your posture, can say, hey, do this, do that.
Yeah.
Or you can reach out to us, because we're very accessible and we're happy to give you feedback around those things at Bulletproof.
Yeah, 100%. And just as a bit of a shameless plug, coming from a background of like bro lifting, like 5x5, bodybuilding, bench press and curls and nothing but, going from that with a decent fitness base, I would say, from a military background to jiu-jitsu, the one thing that I felt I was missing is not necessarily raw power in a linear fashion, but like you were mentioning, that strength in different ranges, the strength in areas that may not necessarily be covered in a traditional lifting program. So one thing I would say to those out there that are doing maybe 3 strength sessions a week or even 2, and it is more traditional bro lifting, you may not be moving in the direction you think you are.
Yeah, well, I think it's just not considered, because you're all good till you're not.
Exactly.
You don't know you don't have that range until someone forces you, and you tap off.
Yeah.
You're not even being submitted. You're being tapped off a lack of being able to move your body, right?
Yeah.
So,
So moving on from strength and conditioning and going a bit more into jiu-jitsu, I know, because I've known you for a long time, that you did other martial arts before jiu-jitsu, like taekwondo. But what was was there an event, or what was the change of mind that made you go from a young, inspiring ballerina to a martial artist?
I don't know if I was an inspiring ballerina. I might have been an aspiring ballerina.
Aspiring, sorry.
God, that guy's an inspiration. You see that little fat 6-year-old? My God.
I'm inspired.
Man, if TikTok was around back in the day, would have been me, man, in that blue leotard, my Jiffy's on. Goddamn, shaking my fat little booty. No, look, I think my mum was just looking for a daycare alternative, to be honest. Like, she could drop me and my sister there and then go shopping. Like, boom. That's cheap.
Win-win.
Drop us off at the local church.
Yeah, but all jokes aside, like, ballerinas are no joke, bro.
No,
That's
no,
incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it helped me a lot in terms of flexibility and body awareness, but it didn't really make me much more athletic. I was a chubby kid, wasn't fit, and then my mum was like, "Oh, you know what would be great for a fat little unfit kid? Gymnastics."
Which is incredibly difficult as well, right?
Man, I was the reason my gymnastics team's lost. I could do like rolls and cartwheels and stuff. It's like, hang from this bar. No, you have to do things now. I can't hang on. Like freaking Cartman in a leotard. So it's like, man, to be honest, it wasn't a good time for me, because I got bullied too.
Right.
But
so these were more activities your mum and dad just put you into.
Yeah, my mum didn't want me to play contact sports. Like I played soccer when I was quite young. And because I was like really unfit and chubby, I was the goalie because I just couldn't run.
Goldberg from Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, except more wheezy. And I don't mean like Lil Wayne wheezy. I mean like, but like all these formative things, like me being bullied really, even though it did a lot of negative things to my self-esteem, it made me exceptionally determined because I was like, there's got to be a way. It's got to be a way. And then, yeah, it just hit a critical point where I just was getting beat up, like not every day, but like on a very regular basis and left out and stuff. And I just wanted to change it somehow. And I had seen that there was people running around in white pajamas in my school hall, like after school, like around like 5 p.m. And it turned out to be Taekwondo.
Yeah.
And I just said to my mum, please, can I go do this? Because she knew how badly I was getting picked on. So she said, all right, as long as you do your homework. And I was like, super nerd. I was like, homework, done. Let's go to training.
How old were you at this stage?
I was 10 and a half-ish. Yeah, about that time. And man, it was just revolutionary because, well, they were like, all right, well, what can you do? And I was like, I don't know. I can do the splits. They're like, really? I was like, yeah. Boom, boom, front, middle splits. Like,
which is Taekwondo.
We can work with that
martial art. Yeah.
Like, can you do a sit up? No. And they're like, all right, we got something to work on here. But just that classic, running around the hall, sit ups, push ups, that really changed my life. But then also sitting in horse stance for, like for those of you who don't know, like horse stance is like a very wide, like double shoulder width wide position to a 90-degree squat, and you just stay there and do techniques.
Yeah. It's
fantastic for building leg strength and, specific endurance in that position. So that was like a really good base for me. And around that same time, my dad was having, I wouldn't say a midlife crisis, but
he bought 1 or 2 Porsches,
Well, no. He bought like a pec deck, pull down, like.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
Nice.
he bought a full kit. He had squat rack on the back veranda.
That's a crisis I can
Easy
get
curl.
behind.
Oh yeah. But he was running like 10Ks a day. I couldn't keep up with him on my BMX. My mum would be like, "Go on, get out there." I'd like do 1 lap of our block. All right, Dad. And he was just powering off like every morning, getting up, running, lifting weights. He was doing protein shakes with like freaking brewer's yeast. So my father's a vegetarian, right? So he would get like skim milk powder. So he would do a tiny bit of dairy and very occasionally like seafood, but no eggs, no anything. Like water, brewer's yeast, for those of you who don't know, is 50% protein.
Damn.
But
Is
it
it really?
tastes like sour dirt.
Like
Just get salty, like put salt on dirty coins and suck those. Like that's what brewer's yeast tastes like, except gritty.
Yummy.
It's disgusting.
they use a lot of brewer's yeast now. I know this, because of like having Atlas and all these mums groups and whatever. Brewer's yeast, they put it in all those like cookies that are supposed to improve lactation for the mum and stuff while they're breastfeeding.
Yeah,
but
right. Okay.
But like they're just like delicious cookies.
Mate, don't get it twisted, bro. Like he used to call it tiger's milk. He'd blend it up after a workout. And I'd be
Makes
like,
you a man.
all right. And he would just get a heaped like tablespoon of like, he'd worked it out to be, whatever it was, 30 grams. So there's 15 grams of protein in there. And it would go from looking like a nice milkshake to just being like, horrible.
Damn.
But he was an animal for it. My dad's a madman. Like you think I'm crazy? Man, I am 20% of the person my father is in terms of just crazy eccentricness. And observing what he did, finding martial arts, I just started like, because he'd be at work all the time, I would just start playing around on the weights on the back veranda. And one time he came home and kind of caught me out. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "No, nothing." I didn't know what I was doing. I was just bored kid. And he said, "All right, okay." He's like, "Well, you shouldn't do this." And I was like, "Nah, show me. Like, I want to do something." And he just showed me a couple of different moves, which were like nothing, or like squat with just the bar. Like, here's a push up. Here's nothing. And he's like, just don't put any weight until you can do like 100. He's like, there's no way this kid's going to get to 100. And just kind of left me to it.
He's still working on that one sit-up from Taekwondo.
Exactly. But then eventually I just got bored and I was like, you know what? This whole squat and a bar thing's bullshit. I'm going to put some weight on this mother. So I just started stacking it up. And, you know, I'm pretty nerdy. So I started hitting him up and being like, have you got any magazines? Have you got any books? And
How old were you at this point?
About 11.
Damn.
And he gave me, back in the day, there was a magazine called Reps Magazine. There was also Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, like the OG version. Professor Ron Laura's The Matrix, which is all about trying to create hypertrophy, which is through hyperplasia, is this idea of splitting a muscle cell in half, and then you've kind of got double the muscle cells, and then you make them bigger. But it hasn't actually been proven to be done in humans. It has been done in animals, right? But the idea of this program, it is a shit ton of partials. Like it's like quarter rep, now 2 quarters rep, 3 quarters full rep, 1 rep. Like it's just like, huge volume. Yeah. But I got really jacked off it. Like it's my dad is just a maniac for details. He made these like flip books of like this many reps and all this stuff. And I started learning exercise programming kind of from my dad. He just kind of left me to it, but I was just like sucking it up as just a nerdy kid, like, oh, okay. And also I had that bullied kid, you know, it's like, that.
I'll show those motherfuckers.
Yeah, I was like, I was just like,
yeah,
kick me on the ground when I'm down, punch me in the nose. I'm going to get so strong. I was looking at these bodybuilding dudes like, yeah, that's going to be me. Wow. And invariably, this actually kicked puberty into gear. I hit puberty when I was about 12.
Damn.
So I've been this tall since I went from being the little
beat
fat
the shit
kid,
out of puberty, mate.
Right. I was shaving when I was 12 years old. Fuck. I'm not going to lie. I
started shaving when I was 19. Damn.
And I've never shaved.
You still look 19.
Fuck.
I went from being the little kid to being like the big kid with capability.
And then
it changed everything.
And from there, what made you go from Taekwondo into Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah.
Look, probably like I always had the aspiration to try and be the best at something because I sucked so bad as a young kid. And I always thought, if I could be the best in the world, people would give a care about what I do, which is not necessarily true. And I just pushed really hard because I wanted to go to the Olympics for Taekwondo. And that led me to Melbourne and pursuing it full time. Invariably, I wasn't good enough. I didn't make selection. And yeah, it kind of broke my heart because I'd been on Taekwondo since I was very young. I was 25 years old. And my coach just said to me, mate, you didn't make the Olympics. You're kind of done. And look, I could have fought back against that, but I just bought in so hard to him and believing him. I was like, all right, well, man, I think I must be done. And I pretty much just never went back.
Yeah, right.
Like kind of broke my heart a bit. I had a bit of turmoil. And at that time I'd moved to St Kilda and I had seen dudes walking around with gis wrapped up in belts, like red gis, black gis, blue gis. I'm like, what the hell is that? And
that's not white.
No, that's right. If you were lucky in Taekwondo, like the mad flex is like once you make black belt, you get to have a black lapel.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So cool. Maybe like some kind of colored stripes, some bullshit.
Not like these jiu-jitsu gis that look like a NASCAR. Yeah. Pow, pow, patch, like just labeled to shit house.
And I just eventually walked up and I kind of just went, man, what do you do? And I didn't.
But it wasn't absolute back then, was it?
No. This was Peter DeBean's. Like absolute didn't exist.
Yeah, it didn't exist.
This is like Peter DeBean and John Will are really credited with being the forefathers of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Australia, but predominantly Victoria.
Yeah.
But they were the initial guys. They went over to back in 88 or 89 to Brazil. Like I'm good friends with Peter DeBean and I've spent a lot of time with him. I've picked his brain and he told me all about how he sees it. And I've also spent a small amount of time with John Will and had a chance to speak with him and got his take on how he pursued it. And if it wasn't for those two guys, we wouldn't have jiu-jitsu the way it is today. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of Brazilian innovators and people who came over to Australia and pushed jiu-jitsu over time. Credit to them. But in terms of my experience, how I started with Peter DeBean.
And then we met each other in Brazil,
yes.
right? So obviously you fell in love with jiu-jitsu enough to take trips to Brazil? Or was there another motive to...
Yeah, dude, like I had talked to other people and they basically were like, Brazil is the Holy Land. And at that time, someone had converted a VHS tape, which was like the Art Suave. It's like the old school thing where they would have footage of someone fighting And they're like, here's the guy, and he's like Tedder or Galvam or whoever, like old school footage at fighting at the Tajuka Tennis Club, and then cut to them training, and then now they're surfing, like a lifestyle video.
Oh,
and then like
nice.
kind of cool music. Like,
Well, I mean, that's what it was like back then. Like you talk to Fabio about those days, right? And he'll tell you that, you know, it was, I mean, it's even today, jiu-jitsu is a young sport compared to other sports.
Sure.
But back then it was even younger. Fabio was like, you know, nowadays you got white belts who train like legitimate professional athletes. Whereas back then, even the black belts, he was like, man, we trained like 1, maybe 2 hours a day. Then we went to the beach and we ate acai and surfed and hung out. Like it wasn't a professional sport, but that's all it, I don't want to say that's all it took because they still trained hard.
there was
but that's all
obviously-
it took to become a world champion.
yeah,
you
there
know?
was less people doing it.
Yeah, so it was less competitive by default,
Yeah,
right?
But the guys doing it were pretty hard.
Oh no, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. I'm
shoot box
saying,
and
I'm not
like it
saying
was-
they didn't train.
No,
hard,
no.
But they didn't. But the way, white belts now train 2-3 times a day, every day, and they got like, you know, privates with other world class black. You know, man, it's the level now is a joke.
I need to sort my shit out.
Yeah.
Well, look,
You've done Monday and Tuesday, and you've done what? 4 jiu-jitsu classes and 3 weightlifting sessions already?
Yeah.
Yeah, weak.
Is that all?
Exactly.
Young people today.
JT did that before he got here.
Well, man, look, I get up early, you know, that's me. But I don't know, like I'm an obsessive person, and jiu-jitsu just changed my mind about my capacity because I just thought I was pretty good and I clearly just didn't know how to grapple, and it just kicked my ass. And, you know, seek adversity is at the heart of what I do. And when I had heard that some guys like, shout out to Mick Wilson, Big Mick, he was a black belt. He'd been a black belt for like a couple of years then. He was my friend. He said, I'm going to Brazil. And there was a couple other guys who were going to go to Brazil. I'd done jiu-jitsu for about a year. And they said, yeah, we're going to go to the Rio Open. This is back in 2009. I started in March 2008. And it was like June, July of 2009. And there was like 4 other guys going, and I was like, man, I'm gonna get up on that. Like, I've never been to Brazil, and I was just a savage for it. And I was just training jiu-jitsu as much as I could and doing PT. And I'd come from that Olympic level hustle, which is train morning, rest, train lunch, rest, train night, like 6 hours a day plus, with a very professional mindset of stretching, recovery, pool session, you know, lift your weights, like a very regimented approach. So when I came and dudes were just like, yeah, whatever, I have beers after training, I was like, what? And I had that advantage, man. Like I really had a black belt mentality, even though I wasn't very good. And the gym I was at was savage, even though but wasn't very technical. I was tough because I was getting beat down 2 or 3 times a day, and it just hardened me to what jiu-jitsu could be. So then when I actually got to be in Rio, and I trained at Gordo Jiu-Jitsu back then, I got to train at Gracie Baja in Baja, but staying in Baja de Tijuca, which is like Little Baja, Little River off to the side, and seeing some of the guys in poverty there and how hard they go, I was like, I'm not even going hard. Yeah. These guys are doing mornings, lunches, they're training like 3 hours at night to the death, and then dude lives in a hut on the mountain.
Yeah, it's different level, eh? It's like,
and he's wearing the same gi all day. I mean, a question on the hygiene, but if you've only got 1 gi or 2 gis and you want to train 6 hours a day, that's what it takes. So it elevated my understanding of how much discomfort you could be in, but then also how dedicated you could be. And that just it just dialed up my passion. Like, I'm a passionate person, but when I saw that, I was like, bro, this is what it's about, that you just love something so much that it doesn't matter what else is going on in your life. You make this a priority. And I just carried that with me.
And you've been back, what, 3 or 4 times since,
4 times,
right? Yeah. So then the next thing I want to talk about is then obviously your love of jiu-jitsu manifested into something else, right? Which is one of your newer projects, right? You started Jugo a little while back, still relatively new, but a little while back, which is a jiu-jitsu based card game. There's been a couple of 2 editions of it now, right?
Yep.
And then what's coming out later this year is, like Kieren said at the start, the first ever Jiu Jitsu Super Hero.
Jugo, the power of Jiu Jitsu.
Right? So
Correct.
tell us a bit about the card game and the book.
Okay, so like the card game was in the back of my head since I was about probably a purple belt. Because when I was a kid, I loved Uno, smashed Uno with my sisters in the car. We're in the back of the old bloody
It's
19...
nothing like when you're a kid.
Road trip.
I'm kind of like, Atlas, for most people know Atlas, my 2-year-old. Like, I don't know if this is, if it's mean to have this thought, but I feel like it's kind of like a rite of
You want
passage.
to beat your kid at Uno?
Well, yeah, like he's,
You better learn,
he's
son.
Exactly,
These
right?
are Sao Paulo rules, boy.
Like he's got to cop that,
Draw
the
20,
look on his
bitch.
face when he cops that first draw 4,
Yeah.
like when he's sitting there with Uno, that last card, and you go, whack,
Bam.
draw 4. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, everyone has to experience
that's
that,
it,
right?
man. There's a realities of life. You got to pay to play, son. Your payment is disappointment. But
his
So-
dad, he'll
so
be disappointed
Jugo.
all the time.
How did you come up with the concept of Jugo?
well, I'm obsessed with learning, and I had conceptualized jiu-jitsu. Actually, it's funny because full credit to Eddie Bravo in terms of innovating. I got his book, I think it was the 10th Planet System, at one stage. And at the front of the book, he had mapped out this position, chill dog leads to this and Homer Simpson leads to that. And, like meat hook. And I was like, wow, he's mapped this out, like terminology to the side. He's constructed this whole thing. This leads to this leads to that as a mind map or a flow. And that influenced the way I thought about jiu-jitsu because, to be honest, my first 2 years of jiu-jitsu, I knew like one sweep. I kind of knew a little bit of mount control and then like armbar. That's it.
And I know even less than
I just, that's all and I got really good at that stuff. But I think to myself, man, if I'd learned more jiu-jitsu in those 2 years, where could I be? Like my game would be so much more evolved. And I thought, for the best part, what puts people off jiu-jitsu is the fact you're getting crushed. Your face is getting crushed. You're getting choked. There's all this primal instinct going on, which is run away. And really, you got to think your way out. And it's being able to tolerate the crush, not react. Don't push your arm out. Don't push your neck out. And then think your way out. And then when you get on top, kill them.
Yeah.
You got to keep that presence of mind. Like, I'm getting out of this. And when I get my spot,
you're
you're
fucked.
dead.
Yeah.
And if you move your microphone, you're dead. And if you touch your drink bottle, you're dead. In fact, you're going to have to work quite hard to stay alive in the next 10 minutes. So that's the thing. Like, in truth, I went to uni briefly. I was there for like kind of 18 months, whatever. Uni wasn't the right place for me. I was studying education, and how you learn is important. My first coach, Peter Devine, had a teaching style. If you didn't learn the way he taught, then you're an idiot.
Yep.
And you suck at jiu-jitsu. And I was like, dude, what? No,
Incorrect.
that's your limitation as a teacher.
As a teacher,
Yeah,
Like as a
100%.
coach in PT, I knew that I had to communicate in different ways for different people. So I was like, this isn't the way to learn. So I thought there has to be a way to because jiu-jitsu is a game. How could I sequence this? Because I view jiu-jitsu as sequences. And I thought about, I just want to simulate doing jiu-jitsu theoretically. So starting, like you could pull guard or you could do a takedown. So I was like, all right, I'll start there. And I just mapped out these sequences. Anyway, at that time I had an anti-jiu-jitsu girlfriend and she was like, what are you doing? That's so nerdy. I'm like, yeah. And so, she's like, who's going to play this game? I'm like,
Anti-jiu-jitsu.
I was just like, nerdy jiu-jitsu guys. Like, I'm making this for me. Like, I'm making this for my mates who just jones out on jiu-jitsu ideas. And so I tried to think about the positions I knew, which wasn't that many, and I asked other people, like, close guard to this and blah, blah, blah. And so I started just drawing lead pencil drawings on like palm cards. And then I was like, spending all this time with my partner. And I said, look, her name is Hannah. She was my girlfriend many years ago. And I said, look, she loved card games, right? She loved gambling. And I was like, let me show you if I can teach the game to you, like just humor me. And she was like, all right. And she beat me like 4 games in a row. And I was like, dang. And she's like, I like this game. And I was like, ah.
And you're like, I'm changing these
I'm
rules.
the creator.
Bullshit.
But it showed to me that if you understand game mechanics,
you can understand jiu-jitsu. You've just got to separate all that emotion and all that like instinctive, like runaway feeling to just actually theoretically put it through your, like put it out there. And I was like, wow, she doesn't know. She actually even didn't like jiu-jitsu, but she liked this game. And I said to myself, there's something in this. Not long after that, we broke up and I had to move out and I shelved the game. I just packed it away and I pretty much forgot about it. And then what brought it back to the presence of mind was doing meditation at JB's retreat. They had a getaway. I was meditating on the beach, thinking about my life. And I thought, fuck, I haven't done anything. Like I've done heaps of cool stuff. I've traveled. I've had a very privileged life, but I haven't created anything. Like if I die, there's nothing left. And I wasn't satisfied with that. And then a little voice said, you made a game. And I was like, what? I was like, I did. I was like, why didn't I pursue that? And it just became like this itch. And
and it kind of syncs up with what you said at the start, that you kind of made a promise to yourself to be more competitive and less creative.
Well,
more creative and less competitive, right? It kind of like, those 2 points of your life seem to have kind of synced up together a little bit, right?
Coalesced, because I looked at the competitive landscape, right? And I saw what it took to be a world champion. And that's pure dedication. That's like, you can't do anything else. And fortunately or unfortunately, I have my first world privilege. I have my education. I have the support of my family. I have all these things which are amazing. And I was trying to think about like, how can I help other people? Like, how can I impact culture? Like, that's actually my goal. You know, I'm a cultural change agent. I want to put a dent in culture. Okay, tell me who is the world champion in 1999? Who is the lightweight world champion? You can't tell me.
No way.
No one can, right? Unless you were there or you have the deep knowledge. Now, I'm a nerd.
Yep.
I actually chronologically have a rough semblance of who were champions in different eras just for my own reference because I like that. I go deep like that. You know, even 4 years ago, people forget who was the champ, right? But we put it in our brain like it's so important. But you know what is actually important? Uno. We're still playing Uno to this day. Like who invented it? You guys don't know.
Yeah.
I know. It was a barber back in 1935. Like, you know, he just invented the game to teach his kids like colors and numbers. And he wanted to make a game that wasn't associated with gambling. And, you know, like that was his intention. And I thought, if I could help teach people jiu-jitsu through a game, because gamification is possibly the best way to teach anything.
100%.
Maybe that could be cool. And also, I used to do graffiti, right? So I was a bit of a rebel, bit of a vandal, just a over-entitled middle-class white boy wanting to be cool. But I had a creative itch and I didn't have an outlet. And yeah, I was like, well, this satisfies that because maybe I can draw the images and it just got me down this creative path. But at the same time, as I started releasing the first version of the game, I already had a storyline in my head for like some kind of a jiu-jitsu hero. Like Bruce Lee wanted to give the world a Chinese superhero, like a superstar, which he did. In his short life, he died when he was 32, right? He only made 4 movies. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he made many movies as a kid, but as Bruce Lee, the star we know, only 4 movies officially. Think about that. I thought to myself, I'm not the hero, but I could create a hero. And I feel that like jiu-jitsu changed my life in such a positive way. If I could create advocacy for young kids to do jiu-jitsu, like if I'd found jiu-jitsu when I was 10, you know, maybe my life would be totally different. But I found it when I found it. And if I could speak to a young bullied kid and say, hey man, you should try jiu-jitsu, it would change your life. That's what I could do. Whether it's through the game or through the book, it's kind of all come together in that way that I just want to be like the jiu-jitsu advocate.
So the game, you created the second version of the game, which is when you really started to generate the characters, the storyline, and that developed into a full novel series through Jugo, The Power of Jiu-Jitsu, and that book is coming out this year. So it's all
Well summarized, Kieren. You pulled it all in so well. That was genius. Well done.
Well, tell us. So I know you're a busy man, JT, and because I don't want to keep you too long because we could talk forever, but I know you've got lots of things to do. Just give us a quick. What can people expect from the book? Like, you know, what would essentially, if I picked up the book and read the little spiel that's on the back of the book, like, what can we expect to learn about this character? And then, you know, where can people find out more about it and stuff like that?
So Jugo is the skinniest, nerdiest, uncoolest kid of all time. And he lives in a small, crappy industrial town called Greystanes. Greystanes has been built out in this place called the Valley, which used to be it was a failed gold mining town. And it was really built out of nothing by a guy named Nero Caesar Vieira. He's the founder of the town. He built the factory. He built the church. He built the school. He built the town to service his factory. Jugo's father works in the factory. He goes to this school. He gets bullied every day of his life. The book opens at the first day of year 6. It's Jugo's last year of school. He just hopes it's going to be better. It's going to be different. But invariably, the bully, Marcus Caesar Vieira, the son of Nero, is still there. He's been kept back for a 3rd year. This kid has repeated the 6th grade 3 times. He's 14 years old. He's a freaking man-child, and he does boxing. And he hates Jugo because Jugo is incredibly smart, and Marcus is not. And Marcus punches Jugo in the face like nearly every day. But the thing is, Jugo is the smartest kid of all time. So we don't know this, but he's there. He has perfect recall. He can never forget anything he has ever learned. But he's awkward. He's socially awkward. He's kind of like, he's very sensitive. He's a ginger. He's the only ginger in the whole town. Not even his older sisters are gingers.
That's a tough break.
Mate.
Why are you looking at me?
It's 1991. Like, it's tough, right? It's tough for a ginger in a small town in 1991. And basically, he's very unfortunate in a lot of ways. He just hides in the library. Like the bully, you're never going to catch a bully in the library. He's out terrorizing kids in the playground. So that's kind of like his safe haven. And the librarian, Miss Michelle, actually loosely based on my good friend Michelle Nicolini.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, is, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion. But it's 1991. No one cares. She's moved to this small town and she's the librarian and her husband works in the factory. Basically, everyone who lives in the town works in the factory. And she teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the local community college. And, well, not community college, sorry, the like PCYC, variation. And she just has enough and she goes up to Jugo. She's like, you got to pull your head out of these books. You got to learn some jiu-jitsu to change your life. And this book is the story of what that does to Jugo's life. But there is a small change here, which is a slight change of gear. There is another character named Marrow. Marrow is the youngest son of Death. Death's name is Mori. Mori in Latin means death. He has a wife. Her name is Mary. They have a whole bunch of kids. They have thousands of kids. And they are all reapers. And reapers are kind of boring. They're not good. They're not bad. They're just there. And they exist in a frequency of light that we can't see. It's called the shadow. And they're floating around us all the time within the world of Jugo. And Marrow doesn't want to be a reaper. His dad's like, what are you talking about? You're a reaper. It's the family business. Yeah. You have no
I'm
say
a reaper. My dad was a reaper. My dad's dad was a reaper.
Right. And he's like, nah, Dad, I like life. Like he just kind of floats around because he's young. He hasn't kind of entered the business. He's just learning. And he just defies his dad. He's like, no, I don't want to be a reaper. His dad's like, nah, mate, you're going to take your exam, which is he has to basically ferry a soul to the other side. We don't get into, what comes after. They're just there. They're like a taxi driver. They show up, you die, and they just go, come on, we'll show you to the other side, the next place. We don't get into that. There is a great moment of defiance where Marrow gives life back to somebody he's meant to
take
the life away. And therefore, his dad's like, that's it. I'm kicking you out of the family. I'm stripping you of your powers. I never want to see you again. I'm kind of banishing you to Earth. So he goes from being this kind of wraith type ghosty character to being solid, no powers, can't float, can't move around, can't transmit, and just stuck in grey stains.
Well, he's going to learn some jiu-jitsu too. I can feel it.
But that's the thing, right? Because Jugo's so sensitive. His skin is sensitive. His eyes are sensitive. His hearing sensitive. A kind of power that Jugo has is he can see frequencies of light other people cannot see. So he can see Marrow. And they happen to bump into each other. And, you're going to find out what happens next.
And it's going to be exciting to read. I've already heard some initial feedback from a student of mine who you gave a copy to and who has 3 kids. And the kids, I know from speaking to him, the kids love it. He, even as an adult, loves it. You know, like he's an adult. He even said to me, he goes, "Oh man, I don't read that much anymore, but I used to read a lot." And he's like, "I'm not an author, but I know when a book's well written or when it isn't." He's like, "Man, this is really good. The kids love it," because he's reading it to his younger kids that aren't old enough to read it themselves. And yeah, so from Dave, right, it's got really good feedback. I mean, I was excited hearing that. Like,
well, I mean, there's a much bigger story arc. So originally when I had written the book, it was like 120,000 words. And I took it to an editor. I pitched a few editors, and the editor I went with, Connie, she's like, "Who are you aiming this for?" I was like, like 10 to 12-year-olds. She's like, 10 to 12-year-olds not reading, like adults don't read 120,000 words. Like you got to cut this up. So essentially it is 2 books, even though the first book, The Power of Jiu-Jitsu, stands by itself. If you only read that book, it's enough, you know. But there is a broader story arc that involves all characters from the first book to the second, and there's a lot more involved, and you know, there's other stuff coming. But I mean, originally when I wrote the book, I wanted to write a comic. I could just see it in my head as a comic. And when I wrote the text, I was like, "Oh, look, drawing takes forever. I'll just write the text." I sat down to write like the first issue of the comic, and I wrote 25 pages of text. And I was like, "Dang, it's a book."
Yeah.
It's going to be so much work now. But it's been great. You know, like it was a big process. It really started in 2019, and then lockdown enabled me to write it and then work through the editing process, which has taken, 6 to 8 months. And then now we're at that point, which is really exciting, that all the files are with the bookmaker distributor in the United States. And I'm just waiting for the final e-proofs to say, yes, that's good, that's good, that's good. And then it will be available for pre-sale through BookBaby. So if you're interested in the pre-sale, you're hearing this and you're like, "Oh, that sounds cool." It is a really good gift for kids who maybe don't do jiu-jitsu, but you're trying to get them interested, or even kids that don't read but are interested in martial arts. It's like kind of double value there. If you just go to jugoplay.com, you can register your email for the pre-sale. We will be giving some prizes and some giveaways for people who register for the pre-sale. So that will be available on pre-sale in 2 to 3 weeks.
Awesome. And we'll put a link to your website and all your social media, your personal social media, and Jugo Play to Instagram in the show description. So if you're listening to this and you want to get that link again, it will be in the show description for you. Awesome. So JT, thanks so much for coming on the show. Very conscious of your time. Appreciate everything that you do for jiu-jitsu.
Oh, and mate. I mean, we might have you on another 2 or 3 times before we get to Joey. So
at least.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. So you'll be back.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the work you guys have done, because you guys have really.
Well, this has been our kind of like, the lockdown was the catalyst for us to do this podcast, right?
Our lockdown, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're freaking stuck with it.
Who knows where it goes, guys? So thank you for the work you do. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, JT.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening.